Greetings, fellow movie lovers. Welcome to 25 Cent Film, where we explore the world of cinema, the 21st century, one year at a time. I'm your host, McNeill Mullikin, and today I am bringing you all a very special episode. Throughout this journey that has been 25 Cent Film, I've covered my top 5 favorite films from each year, spanning from 2000 all the way to 2024. We've done our own award show, some miscellaneous topics on the best of the 21st century, but today marks the end of an era. 25 Cent Film was always intended to be the celebration of a quarter century's worth of cinema, and that quarter of a century has finally come to a close with the end of 2025. So, in honor of that, I'm going to talk about not just my top 5 favorite films of 2025, like I have all the other years previously, but my top 10. The reason for that is that I don't have a guest for this episode. Today, it's just me. My co-host Justin Da Silva, who's been co-hosting with me since the episodes that have gone beyond the journey through a quarter century's worth of cinema. He unfortunately couldn't make it today. But also 2025 has just been an incredible year for cinema that totally surpassed any of my expectations, which is awesome because we are ending the quarter of a century on such a high. Plus, not having a guest or co-host today allows me to talk about more movies, and there are so many amazing movies that came out this year in 2025 that I want to talk about with you all. As you all may remember, the way I did previous year breakdowns was starting off with some basic awards and box office information, but we aren't going to do that for this year as the Oscars haven't happened yet. And the highest grossing film of 2025 is still technically unclear because Avatar Fire and Ash hasn't run its course in theaters yet entirely. And it could crack the number one spot, but we still have to wait and see and figure out what's going to happen with Avatar Fire and Ash. So instead, today, let's start off with some honorable mentions. To preface, I saw 58 new releases in 2025, just too shy of my goal to hit 60. I was so close, but I'm still going, even though we technically are in 2026 now. So many of these movies have been great. But here are a few honorable mentions to kick off before we get to the top 10. First honorable mention, Die, My Love, a fascinating, atmospheric, surrealist take on postpartum depression and mental illness with an emotionally powerful performance from Jennifer Lawrence as well as Robert Pattinson. Wake Up Dead Man, a worthy entry in the Knives Out franchise that's probably the trickiest to decipher thus far, but it's the darkest of the trilogy, the most thematically rich, and has yet another stacked cast, just another captivating whodunit, and I'd love to see more of these from Rian Johnson. Hamnet, an absolute tearjerker and profound historical fiction film about grief, love, and the healing catharsis that art can provide. It gets off to a slow start, but once it gets going, it totally sucks you into the sweeping emotion of the story. Jessie Buckley gives one of the greatest performances of the decade in this film, and the ending is one of the best in recent memory, in my opinion. Grab some tissues if you haven't seen this one yet, because you're going to need them. The Life of Chuck, another profound and existential film in 2025, but one with a philosophy of seizing the day and embracing the moment. It has a unique structure, and there's so much to unpack during each act of the film because they're each so unique. It also showcases a softer side to horror mastermind Mike Flanagan with his sensibilities. And I hope we see more of this down the line from him. And then finally, Caught Stealing, Darren Aronofsky's most accessible film yet that totally surpassed all of my expectations. I can't believe it's being completely overlooked this award season. It's filled with memorable characters and sequences, combined with its tight script. Caught Stealing is such a thrill from beginning to end. Okay, now let's kick things off, starting with my number 10 favorite film of 2025, and that is Warfare. I saw Warfare in theaters a few weeks after it was originally released. I was a bit late to the game when I saw it in late April. I saw it with a couple of friends, and I knew absolutely nothing about it going in. I almost missed it in theaters, actually, but I am so glad I saw this one on the big screen. You have to see this movie on the biggest screen possible. War isn't a genre that I gravitate toward often, but I love a good war film when done right. And Warfare is one of the best war movies I've seen in the last 10 years. This movie is completely riveting. It's not a very long movie, coming in just a little bit more than an hour and a half. The first 20 to 30 minutes, not much happens. I knew something was going to happen, but I was just waiting. And when the thing happens, I was on the edge of my seat, gripping my legs until the very end. I've never had such a physiological response to a movie the way I did to Warfare. It's such an intense, brutal, and honest depiction of the war in Iraq. It's directed by Alex Garland as well as Ray Mendoza, who was a Navy SEAL in the Iraq War. And Warfare is not intended to be based on true events. It's based on the memories of the platoon members of these real life events, which add such an interesting psychological layer to the film that I've never seen used as an approach in a war film before. It does a great job of making you care about the relationships between these guys, especially when the action kicks in. You're invested in their brotherhood and you latch onto their lives when their survival is at stake. It's a masterclass on the technical side of things. It's not a very colorful movie, which is intentional. It's not very fancy looking in particular, but it's so raw and manages to find ways to make images stand out in its colorless environment. Plus, the special effects and makeup for the injuries are absolutely remarkable and incredibly realistic looking. Warfare is not for the squeamish or the faint of heart by any means, as it does not hold back on the violence and realism. It certainly got my heart rate up, and I can't say that about many movies. In a world where we are getting tons of great horror movies, go ahead and throw Warfare on that list because it's truly horrifying. Coming in at number 9 for me is going to be Thunderbolts. Before this movie came out, I was extremely fatigued by the comic book genre as a whole. Sure, there have been some exceptions, but Thunderbolts managed to draw me back in as a full-fledged fan, full of optimism for the genre. Thunderbolts reminded me of everything I used to love and now love again about the MCU. Everything from the action to the characters to the banter just drew me in. Plus, amongst all of its comic book movie glory, it has something to say, unlike many in its oversaturated genre. It's all about mental health, and I appreciate that it pushes the boundaries thematically for a comic book film. It tackles themes of depression, loneliness, regret, isolation, and it handles all of this with its own artistic voice, emphasizing the importance and power of redemption, second chances, and community. The cast is sensational, and each of them give fantastic performances, honing in on the personal struggles that they each experience individually. Plus, they just work together so well as a group as they overcome their battles, literally and figuratively, in this found family. Florence Pugh cements herself as one of the leading members of the MCU as such a charismatic lead in her character, Yelena. And I can't wait to see what's in store for this character in the future of the MCU. Everyone from Sebastian Stan to David Harbour to Wyatt Russell to Julia Louis-Dreyfus are at the top of their game in this movie. One of the biggest standouts, though, is Lewis Pullman as Bob, aka the Sentry, aka the Void. This was a character I never particularly cared for in the comics because he's such an OP, but Thunderbolts made me so invested in this character. The way this character ties into what the film is doing thematically just works so well, and I love how Marvel took risks with this character and it paid off. The Void as a villain is probably one of my all-time favorites in the MCU, just because of how complicated he is and what he represents, and also just the visual representation of this character is so cool. I also love how surrealist and trippy the third act gets, which is another bold swing from Marvel and something that they've never done before in the past, and it works wonderfully. I just think that Thunderbolts is such a fun time with these characters and in the MCU, and it felt like the MCU in its phase 1 or phase 2 days that I've missed so much in recent years. Most importantly, it actually allowed audiences to finally see a direction as to where the MCU is going in the near future, and I'm just so excited to see these characters again on the big screen, and I'm glad to be happy about the state of the comic book movie genre again, as it is something that is very near and dear to me. Coming in at number 8 for me is going to be Marty Supreme. Now, this is the most fresh on my mind on this list because I just saw it last night as of recording today, which is January 7th. Now, it's very evident that Josh Safdie clearly has a distinct style in his filmmaking. If you go back and look at the movies he's made in the past alongside his brother Benny Safdie, like Good Time and Uncut Gems, these are very frantic, high energy crime dramas with fast paced dialogue and tension filled sequences. Marty Supreme is more of the same, but Josh Safdie has found a way to improve on what he's done in the past. He's becoming more and more of a distinguished filmmaker with each and every movie that he's making. And I'm genuinely excited for every time he puts something out now, especially after Uncut Gems from 2019. Benny Safdie's The Smashing Machine was a decent film, however, but nowhere near the level of this, which is Marty Supreme. Marty Supreme is yet another tension filled crime drama about an egotistical, obsessive guy who is so determined to get his way that he will do anything he possibly can, even if it means putting himself and others in harm's way. Timothy Chalamet delivers what might just be his best performance yet, although I'm not quite ready to say that officially, as I need some more time to digest this movie. He perfectly encapsulates the obsession and delusion of Marty that you don't see Timmy at all. You see Marty. He disappears into this role just like he does as Paul Atreides in the Dune movies, a complete unknown as Bob Dylan, and Beautiful Boy, just to name a few. I love this visual style of this film. Josh Safdie has a true knack for telling stories set in New York with this grungy look that feels so lived in. And with Marty Supreme taking place in the 1950s, it added another layer to it. It also manages to find a way to take its setting and pair it with an 80s inspired soundtrack and score that finds this harmony that works so well. It's immensely entertaining as the movie keeps you on your toes, wondering how each situation just manages to get worse and worse and what's going to happen next. There aren't many likable characters, but it's the absurdity that works so well and it's so entertaining. Plus, there's a layer of dark comedy in there that I wasn't personally expecting, but it can be so shocking at times, and it makes sense for this film and for the characters. It does leave you with just enough to think about as the credits roll, but it doesn't end on a note that I was expecting because it's so different from the end of Good Time or Uncut Gems, the other Josh Safdie films as of recently. But it works as a way to subvert expectations. As far as I'm concerned, Timothy Chalamet deserves the Oscar for Marty Supreme, although I do need to see Blue Moon because I love Ethan Hawke and I know that he has a chance as well, but I do think it's Timmy's year. Coming in at my number 7 is going to be One Battle After Another. Look, I know this is much lower on my list than it would be compared to many other people's lists, but I have to be honest with myself and with you all, and that I simply just enjoyed everything above this film a little bit more. Obviously, I liked it a lot, and I think it's phenomenal, as it did make my top 10 list of the year. I just think there's a few more better movies than One Battle After Another, which says a lot because this movie is so good. I want to focus on what makes this movie work, though. Obviously, it's saying so much about the political climate of modern day America, and there is a lot to unpack thematically with this movie. But One Battle After Another simply wouldn't work without its father daughter dynamic. Paul Thomas Anderson could do as much as he wanted to make this as politically charged of a movie as possible. But if there was nothing to latch onto in the story, I don't think I or many people would have cared about what all he's saying in this massive, epic, sweeping story. At its heart, One Battle After Another is about a father trying to save his daughter. It's a trope that we've seen countless times throughout cinematic history, but it just works. And this is one of the best examples of it. This particular dynamic in the film creates so much urgency to the story. It's bombastic, anxiety inducing, and absolutely thrilling from beginning to end. It slows down for some dramatic moments here and there, but it never loses sight of that tension and suspense that it relies so heavily on. It can also be darkly funny as it illustrates the absurdities of the extremes in our modern day cultural climate, which adds to the film's entertainment factor. The performances are phenomenal across the board. Leonardo DiCaprio, unsurprisingly, gives yet another top notch performance as this washed up revolutionary modern day Big Lebowski figure. He plays the cluelessness and the franticness of this character perfectly, and it works really well as the comedic relief at times. Newcomer Chase Infinity is an absolute scene stealer amongst many Hollywood legends, and I can't wait to see what she does next in her career. Teyana Taylor isn't in the film much, but she leaves such an impact on the story that lingers throughout the runtime. Sean Penn delivers what I think might be the best performance of the entire year as Colonel Lockjaw. He does an excellent job of playing someone so despicable and hateable and consumed by such a disgusting ideology, and you want to see him destroyed, just like all of the best villains. He's so believable in this role, and he really is one of the best actors of his generation because he gives so many all-timer performances one after another. Now, I'm not here to say that this is Paul Thomas Anderson's best film. It might be his most accessible, it might be his most entertaining, but I don't think it's his best. That would be There Will Be Blood, in my opinion. But I do believe he deserves Best Director for this movie, as he is the current frontrunner right now and has been for a long time. It's time to give Paul Thomas Anderson the Oscar. It's crazy to think that he doesn't have one anyways. There's so much to think about with One Battle After Another, whether it's the social and political commentary or the psychology of its characters, but it's obviously left such a major impact on moviegoers in 2025, and rightfully so. It truly felt like watching a piece of art from decades ago, particularly the 90s. It's a well-made film from top to bottom, from Johnny Greenwood's unique and stress-inducing score to the sweeping cinematography, all the way to the editing. It just felt like old school filmmaking, and I loved every bit of it. Coming in at number 6 for me is going to be Sinners. One of the biggest cultural phenomenons of 2025 in the film industry was easily Sinners. Sinners came out all the way back in April 2025 and is still being talked about now just as much as it was when it was fresh in theaters. It's become a major awards player, which I was not expecting at all because it's a horror film that came out in April, and the Academy often ignores horror and anything that came out in the first half of the year for the most part. There are exceptions, sure, but that's not what we're talking about here. So that really surprised me that it's become such a big awards contender. However, Ryan Coogler did something with Sinners that many filmmakers can't do with vampire movies, and that's create a distinct atmosphere and tell an original story. I've never seen anything like this before, and I think that's why Sinners has become the massive hit that it is. Set against the Deep South in the 1930s, it starts off what feels like a crime drama, but it slowly morphs into something sinister and supernatural. It pulls inspiration from cultural aspects as well as vampire lore and uses some subtle social commentary to blend together to tell one awesome, memorable, and satisfying vampire movie. From a technical perspective, Sinners is easily one of the best of the year. Music plays such a strong role in the film, and it feels like a character in and of itself in the movie. And Ludwig Göransson composed a score that's so distinct and perfectly captures the mood of the film, from its old blues style to the instrumentation and to its modern day sensibilities. It's a brilliant score that's the heart and soul of the film, and Ludwig totally deserves another Oscar for this score. The performances are incredible across the board. Wunmi Masaku, Delroy Lindo, Haley Steinfeld, Miles Catton, and Jack O'Connell are all excellent, but the standout is obviously Michael B. Jordan as the twins Smoke and Stack. Both have such distinct personalities, and it's so entertaining to see Michael B. Jordan in both of these roles. There's a level of charisma that both these characters have, and he obviously had a ton of fun playing these two characters. It's easily one of the most iconic performances of 2025 as well. Everything from the comedy, the horror, the action, it's all blended brilliantly, creating for a wild ride unlike any other vampire movie I've ever seen before. It's more than just a vampire movie, though. It has something to say about culture, power, and community. It's also a crowd pleaser with some of the coolest scenes of the year, and it's such an awesome movie all around. Coming in at number 5 is Begonia. I was not sure what to expect from Begonia. Yorgos Lanthimos is a very hit or miss director for me, and I was never sure what to make of this film when all the marketing began for it. But I have to say that it's without a doubt my favorite of Yorgos Lanthimos' films. Begonia blew me away and turned out to be something I was not expecting in the slightest, and I mean that as a massive compliment. On the surface, Begonia is a close quarters kidnapping story, but it's really about so much more. This film has so much to say about modern day society, and that's explored through its characters and dialogue. It's a commentary on classism and political division, and explores these themes in such a rich way that leaves audiences with so much to think about after the credits roll. It follows the story of a CEO played by Emma Stone who's been kidnapped by two guys, one of which is a conspiracy theorist who is the mastermind behind this hostage operation named Teddy, played by Jesse Plemons. Once these characters start to interact, it's so clear they are on opposite ends of every spectrum imaginable. It's almost as if they aren't even having the same conversations. And all this emphasizes how the extremes of today are simply not able to have a conversation because people are so far gone in their own tribes, for lack of a better word. The film is seemingly an emphasis on seemingly, more on that later, a cautionary tale of the dangers of getting sucked into internet algorithms because technology is evolving into confirmation bias devices in a way. Algorithms will dump anything you need to see to back up your perspective, as wild as it may be, sending you further and further into an echo chamber. Yorgos Lanthimos completely subverts expectations by going in a direction I did not expect at all because it essentially contradicts the message the film is seemingly building toward. That's the brilliance of the film. It leaves you with so much to think about, and there's so much room for interpretation. I love that it's challenging the audience to determine what the film is actually trying to say through its ending because it genuinely has led to interesting and productive conversations for me and other people, as I've heard as well. Stylistically, it has everything you want from a Yorgos Lanthimos film, especially in the third act, because everything feels so contained and restricted earlier in the film, which is not a bad thing. It's just saving the good stuff for later. I love the score. It feels like it was made for this massive sci-fi epic, but it provides a nice contrast to the small scale nature of the story that makes the stakes feel huge and plays nicely to the character of Teddy. The performances are incredible and stand among some of the best of the year. Emma Stone is obviously great in this movie, and she's great in anything she makes. But in Begonia in particular, she's absolutely commanding in this film. There's an eeriness to how calm she is given the set of circumstances she stumbled upon. She's intelligent and knows how to manipulate her environment, and Emma Stone sells every ounce of this character. Jesse Plemons gives a career best here as Teddy. I truly hope he gets at least an Oscar nomination for this role. I'm just not sure that'll happen yet. We have to see how some things play out. He's so convincing as a conspiracy theorist who's been abused and wronged by the world. Everything from his facial expressions down to his mannerisms and to the way he delivers lines with such strong intensity. He just absolutely nailed this role. Begonia is one of the wackiest films I've seen in a while in the best way possible. It's beautifully made and was one of the biggest surprises of the year for me, and I can't recommend it enough. Coming in at number 4 for me is Weapons. 2025, just like 2024, has been yet another great year for horror films, and Weapons is by far one of the best horror films I've seen in this decade thus far. It's bold, original, insane, entertaining, hilarious, crazy. It's everything you want out of a horror film and more. Zach Kreger, the director, who also made 2022's Barbarian, is a true force to be reckoned with and will likely be one of the best horror filmmakers of his generation alongside Jordan Peele and Robert Eggers as he furthers his career. Weapons tells the story of 17 kids from the same classroom who got up at 2:17 a.m. and ran away in the middle of the night, which is such a fascinating elevator pitch. The premise alone is convincing enough to get horror fans to buy a ticket, but the story itself does not always go in a direction you might expect, and that's a great thing. It has a unique narrative structure that is constantly subverting expectations, but also progresses the story in a way that's unconventional, but works so well for this film. It's told through 6 vignettes, each focused on a different character's perspective on these events in this small town. Each chapter pushes the story further, keeping you on the edge of your seat, wondering what's going to happen next, and takes the audience on such a wild ride, leading to its insane finale. It's also a genuinely funny film, which I wasn't expecting, and I love when the movie finds the right balance of comedy and horror. It's obviously much more of a horror film, but I love that it makes you laugh out loud 1 second and then terrified the next. It was so fun to see in a packed theater because the audience had such massive audible reactions to everything that happened, and it enhanced the experience for everyone. That shared laugh and shared gasps and screams are just so fun. The characters and performances are also very memorable, and I particularly love Josh Brolin, and I love everything that he's in, but I particularly loved his character in Weapons. Amy Madigan as Gladys is an instant classic horror villain. She was a complete maniac that you just absolutely hated and wanted to see die. She's what Dolores Umbridge would be like as some twisted satanic bitch that just wanted to destroy lives and hurt people rather than put kids in timeout in Harry Potter. I really can't recommend Weapons enough. I love what the film is saying about how we weaponize our own fears, paranoias, traumas, and obsessions to fit the narratives we create in our minds. There's also so many details to pick up on a rewatch, and it holds up just as well at home. It's a horror film that elicits responses from the audience in ways I haven't experienced many horror films succeed in doing in recent memory, and it's one of the best horror films of the 2020s and maybe even the last 10 years. Coming in at number 3 for me is going to be the film that was the number one most anticipated movie for me of 2025, and that is Superman. As I mentioned before, Thunderbolts reignited my love of the comic book movie genre as a whole, but Superman took it to a whole other level. I became obsessed again, and I missed that. I started reading comics again, going to comic book stores, keeping up with fan theories, anticipating the future of different franchises. I felt like being a teenager again, and I love that 2025 brought that feeling back in me. Superman is the perfect comic book movie to launch a brand new cinematic universe in today's day and age. Its themes and messages amplify what it's saying to a world that is totally lost in tribalism, being better than your neighbor, and hate. Superman is the real punk rock because being kind is just not as common as it used to be, and punk is not about fitting in. As both a fan of punk rock and Superman, this movie is what we needed in today's culture, emphasizing Superman as a beacon of truth, justice, and a better tomorrow. This film made me want to be a better person, and this is something that I have noticed across fandom when this movie came out back in the summer, which is truly awesome. Superman is a breath of fresh air in the Superman franchise because it decides to focus on what makes him human rather than Kryptonian. This film is a true showcase of nurture over nature because in the face of adversity, Clark Kent always wants to do what's right because it's how the Kents raised him to be. Whether he's saving animals, saving people, or ending wars, he strives to be moral against any challenge. It's his choices and actions that make him who he is, not where he came from. David Corenswet is Superman for the modern day. He's obviously borrowing inspiration from what came before, but he is essentially a modern day iteration of Christopher Reeve's Superman, in my opinion. And I mean that in the best possible way. He fully embodies the Boy Scout energy and nature of this character and does such a wonderful job of bringing the character's charm to the big screen. His performance is just as physical as it is emotional in both subtle and apparent ways. Filling in the shoes of what came before, Corenswet is a complete 180 from Henry Cavill's interpretation of the character, who I think gave a brilliant deconstructive take on Superman, which deeply resonated with me, but I adore both of these iterations. This is a much more lighthearted approach to the character and the lore compared to Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, which is exactly what was needed to revamp this universe. Aside from Corenswet, the cast is perfect. Rachel Brosnahan is the best Lois Lane to date. She perfectly captures the feisty, investigative journalist essence of this character and also has an amazing chemistry with David Corenswet. Nicholas Hoult is the best Lex Luthor to date as well, depicting him as an absolutely despicable person who you want to see defeated. The rest of the cast is perfect, and there's no sense in me listing them off because if you've seen the movie, you know that nobody was miscast in this film. Superman establishes a DCU filled with superheroes and lore. We didn't need another origin story, and James Gunn understood that. It genuinely feels like opening up a comic book. It's vibrant, it's colorful, and action-packed, and so authentic to the character and this universe. It's visually stunning, and there's so many frames that would make for awesome posters on the wall. I also adore the score for this film. I know it's not entirely original, but David Fleming and John Murphy made an iteration of John Williams' classic Superman theme that's entirely their own and distinct for this movie in the modern day. It beautifully captures the tone of the film and has this grand sense of wonder to it that no comic book movie has done lately in recent years. It has this old school classic vibe to it, but with a modern day blockbuster epic feel. I got everything I wanted out of Superman, and it's the hopeful movie we needed in this day and age, and I'm just glad it exists. Coming in at my number 2 is gonna be Train Dreams. I knew absolutely nothing about Train Dreams when I pressed play to watch it on Netflix. I noticed it was a movie people were starting to review on YouTube at the time I watched it, and I noticed it was getting logged on Letterboxd more frequently, so I decided to check it out solely on that basis. Going in blind was the best thing I could have possibly done for my experience watching Train Dreams. I mentioned Begonia being one of the biggest surprises of 2025 for me, but Train Dreams was the biggest surprise. I'm not one to let recency bias get to me. I like to sleep on a film and let it marinate in my mind before I finalize any legitimate thoughts on it. But Train Dreams is one of two movies that climbed up into my top 100 of all time from 2025. And this rarely happens for me anymore. It is a solid list. Following Robert Grainer, an American Northwestern logger in the early 20th century, Train Dreams takes the audience on the journey through his simple life and the tragedy that comes with it. The film is a quiet, poetic exploration of grief, perseverance, and life's greater questions. Train Dreams is a deliberately paced film, and it presents an introspective portrayal of what life used to be like just 100 years ago. The story feels so grounded and so lived in that believing what's taking place on the screen as real just feels natural. The film inherently makes you ponder the contrast of life then and life now, and you start comparing life, which was a slow existence of scarcity, versus today's fast pace and abundance. But there's something endearing about the simplicity of life back then. People were so connected to nature, each other, and even themselves, because that's all there ever was until very recently in human history. I think we could all learn from this way of life and anchor into what's around us rather than the digital world. Granted, I realize the irony of me saying this on the internet. I just have to get my thoughts out somewhere. Joel Edgerton wonderfully encapsulates this very idea of being connected to what's around you and delivers a subtle yet powerful performance as a hardworking man who built a life for himself out of nothing and everything he ever had with his bare hands. He also beautifully depicts a man who has such a profound love for his wife and for his daughter, and it's evident that he would do anything for them. Edgerton tapped into a perfect combination of masculinity and sensitivity, where the two meet in the middle to find this serenity, which I believe is a core value of the main character, Robert. It's apparent even in the way he deals with loss and hardships. Edgerton delivers his dialogue with grace, but his brilliance is in his character's silence, which hits really hard. It's a deeply moving performance, and I truly cannot give it enough praise. Train Dreams is one of the most impressive films of the year from a technical standpoint. The cinematography has this ethereal feel to it that captures a peak of what life used to be, as well as the literal movement of nature and human life in it. The aspect ratio is unique and also enhances the feeling of the film, which serves as this moving portrait through Robert's life, almost as if we're looking through a collection of old photographs. The editing also weaves scenes together in creative, beautiful ways. In terms of the music, Bryce Dessner's score evokes such strong emotion and lives in harmony with the tone of the film. There's multiple recurring variations of themes that complement the melancholic, tender, happy, and tragic moments of Robert's life. The score isn't flashy, and it never intended to be, but its effectiveness demands your attention. It's not the score that I would necessarily give the Oscar to, but I think it's my personal favorite score of the year, and I've probably listened to it the most more than any other. Train Dreams is not just a reflection on what life used to be, it's a celebration of building your own life and finding meaning in the beauty of all of life's simplicities. We're all searching for the meaning of life, but we just have to accept what's in front of us and cherish it. Even in all of our own individual tragedies, we're ultimately connected to all of our moments. not just the present. Train Dreams didn't just emotionally resonate with me. I connected with it on such a spiritual level. It hit me in the soul. I love this movie. But coming in at number one for me is Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. As a massive fan of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein novel, I was beyond excited to see Guillermo del Toro's interpretation of this story. There have been dozens of iterations of Frankenstein in cinematic history, but there haven't been many that are faithful to the source material or many that have been successful in attempting to be true to Mary Shelley's work. However, Guillermo del Toro has unequivocally created the definitive adaptation for Frankenstein for the big screen. Frankenstein is Del Toro's lifelong passion project, and while it is an overall faithful adaptation of the classic novel, it is still its own unique entity with Del Toro's voice at the forefront. Frankenstein has always been a creator versus creation story, and there's no shortage of that here. But Guillermo del Toro places a father and son dynamic into this timeless story, heavily inspired by Catholicism and his own personal experiences, which brings his own sense of relatability to this classic tale. There's also a strong religious undertone to complement the idea of fathers passing their sins onto others, and Del Toro found a beautiful way to take Mary Shelley's story of vengeance and despair and frame it as a story of forgiveness. In this day and age, I think what Del Toro is saying about humanity with this movie is so aptly timed and greatly applicable to real life. I'd argue that this fundamental change to the story is absolutely necessary for where we are culturally. The performances are phenomenal across the board. Oscar Isaac as Victor Frankenstein is one of the best roles of his career. In the beginning, he plays Victor Frankenstein as a charismatic, egotistical scientist who is obsessed with not just his pursuit, but healing the wounds inflicted upon him by his father. By the middle of the film, there's a visible change in the presence of Victor, like he's high on drugs. He's so consumed by his own ambition that he completely spirals into mania, leading to his own demise. Now, while Oscar Isaac is certainly a standout, Jacob Elordi's transformative performance as the creature is the highlight of the whole film. When fully realized, he is terrifying as an enraged monster seeking destruction. But in the earlier stages, Elordi plays the creature like this lost, innocent puppy that just wants to be loved. I was utterly floored by Jacob Elordi's performance as the creature, and I'm eager to see where his career goes after this. Frankenstein is easily one of the most stunning looking films of the year and one of the most striking of the entire decade thus far. Everything from the rich color palette to the graceful cinematography and the massive gothic sets and the beautiful costumes are absolutely gorgeous. There's a couple of moments where it is obvious that the landscapes are visual effects, but it doesn't bother me because overall the visuals are beyond impressive. Alexandre Desplat, one of my personal favorite composers, delivered one of his greatest scores ever. Along with Little Women and The Shape of Water, Frankenstein, I think, is one of Desplat's best. It's a wonderful score with a genius combination of sophistication, whimsy, melancholy, and dread. Even though Guillermo del Toro received his flowers for The Shape of Water, Frankenstein is truly his magnum opus. It's obvious that Guillermo del Toro put his heart and soul into this film, and it truly paid off. It's a technical marvel from beginning to end, and a breathtaking adaptation of Mary Shelley's book with its own changes that make sense for the big screen and this reimagining. Filled with beautiful imagery and symbolism that enhances its themes from this classic tale and leaving its own imprint on what is now a modern day myth, Frankenstein is not just the best film of the year, it's one of the best of the 2020s. It will forever be ingrained in my mind, haunting me with its dialogue, visuals, and tragic storytelling. So it comes in at my number one movie of 2025. So that'll do it for my top 10 favorite movies of 2025. Again, this has turned out to be one of my favorite years for film in recent history, and only time will tell how it stands against some of the greatest years of the 21st century. But I think people will look back on 2025 fondly in the years to come. There were so many great films that I didn't even get to talk about that might be on your list. So just because it's not on mine doesn't mean I didn't like it. But there were some stinkers this year, like there are all years. Before I close things out, I'd like to shout out some top 5 lists of a couple of 25 cent film regulars on prior episodes. First, we're going to start with Justin De Silva, my co host with the last few episodes. His top five are the following. And to preface, this is a drastically different list from mine. Justin and I, a lot of times, have very similar tastes in film, but this year it seems to not be the case so much. Justin's number five is Zootopia 2. His number four is Avatar Fire and Ash. His number three is The Fantastic Four First Steps. His number two is Superman. And his number one is The Gorge. A very unconventional list. I'm obviously not going to trash it because I don't think any of these are bad. I just don't think that these are necessarily the best of the year. But to each their own, and this is Justin De Silva's list. And then also Fiona Elsa's list. Now, obviously, some of you guys are going to remember Fiona from the past episodes as my girlfriend who has been on the show for a ton of episodes. She is now my fiance, and it has been a while since she's been on the show, but I wanted to give her top five of the year as well as we see most of these movies together. Her list is the following. Number five, Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning. Number four, Wicked for Good. Number three, Hamnet. Number two, Weapons. And number one, Sinners. Sorry, Justin, this is a significantly better list than yours. Thank you all so much for tuning in on this journey through cinema in the 21st century with me and everybody that's been on the show. It's been such a fun ride. And while this does mark the end of 25 Cent Film, I'm still going to continue making film commentary content in the future. So stay tuned for that, whether it's written content, film content, anything that's going to happen. Stay tuned. Please comment your favorite films of 2025 in the comment section down below, and let's have a discussion about it. I'm very excited about movies this year. I'm very excited about the award season we're in right now, and I'd love to keep the conversation going down below in the comment section. Until I'm back on a new channel, podcast, blog, or whatever happens, I'll catch you guys later.